Hello, I'm Bailey Leisure, and I'm back with another NFL video, as this is my Week 11 NFL recap of the 2018 NFL season. So starting with the first game of the week, the Packers versus the Seahawks. This was a game that was pretty close as expected. Both quarterbacks played pretty well. Ultimately, the Seahawks won this game. I think there was a little bit of a criticism the way Aaron Rodgers started off really well in this game. Unfortunately, in the second half, he didn't continue that. There was a controversial call late in this game when I think there was like 4.5 minutes left. They only had one timeout. They had a fourth and I think about 2 or 1, very close, very short fourth down conversion, and they decided to punt the football. And the Seahawks were able to hold on for the win. They won that game 27-24. A lot of people are criticizing this, and I think it's good criticism because I don't, even with Aaron Rodgers, he's the comeback king. I would have went for it, knowing he only had one timeout. If you had a timeout more, then it's 50-50. If you had 3 timeouts, even with Aaron Rodgers, I would have said, it's a safe call, and you have to be, you sometimes have to be conservative. But that wasn't the case, and the Packers now are sitting at 4-5-1. The Seahawks are 5-5, still in the playoff race, and the Packers they're holding on for their playoff lives. So we'll see what happens there. Bengals versus the Ravens. As I did my picks video, it wasn't announced who was going to start, but Joe Flacco was out, and Lamar Jackson made his NFL debut. Didn't really do that well. Threw 13 of 19 for 150 yards passing. But running, he actually did very well. He ran for 117 yards though on 27 carries. This was kind of a game manager game when it came to him. I think the Bengals, Andy Dalton played okay. Threw a little over 200 yards and a couple touchdowns, but I think that offense really missed AJ Green. He's probably one of the top 5 NFL receivers in the game, and I think the defense was able to contain Andy Dalton. And the Ravens were able to win a close game, as it always in these AFC North divisional battles. They were able to win 24-21. And man, the Bengals, who started the season at 4-1 or 5-1, they're in trouble. And both teams are sitting at 500, still in the playoff hunt in the AFC. But the Ravens, I think, got a little bit of a momentum back. But the Bengals, they're not doing so well. Buccaneers versus the Giants. This was a game that was, pretty interesting. Ryan Fitzpatrick struggled in this game. He threw 3 interceptions, and he was benched they brought back Jameis Winston, who got it close. I think they were down by like 20 points at this point, but he was able to get it down to 3 points, but he threw an interception, which cost them, and the Giants were able to hold on for a victory. Eli Manning didn't play that well. I think the big story in this game, and the reason the Giants won, was Saquon Barkley. He ran for over 140 yards and a couple touchdowns, and the Giants were just able to get a good performance from him, and that's the reason why the Giants were able to come away with the victory, their second win in a row. Cowboys versus the Falcons, both teams kind of sitting at the below 500 or 500 mark. Both teams trying to stay in the playoff hunt. This was a pretty close game. Neither quarterback did very well in this game. Dak Prescott threw for a little over 200 yards, and Matt Ryan threw for nearly 300 yards. I think the big stars in this game were the top receiving players for the Dallas Cowboys. I think a big reason they won the game was Ezekiel Elliott, as he ran for over 120 yards and got a touchdown. Julio Jones caught 6 passes for over 100 receiving yards, and he got a touchdown. And this was a pretty close game. The Cowboys, I think that a little bit less than 2 minutes left, the Falcons were able to tie this game thanks to the Julio Jones touchdown. But the Cowboys were able to go down the field and were set up for the game-winning field goal, as Moore was able to kick the field goal. He had a big game as he went 3 for 3 and kicking a 50-yard field goal. And the Dallas Cowboys were able to come away with the victory 22-19, and they're back in the playoff race. I'll talk about the impact of the NFC East this week later in my standing. Panthers versus the Lions. This was a interesting game. Cam Newton played very well. He got hurt in this game. He had to leave for a little bit, but he did come back in. He threw for 357 yards and 3 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford was outplayed by Cam Newton, as he only threw for over 200 yards and a touchdown. Galladay was a big reason why the Lions put up some decent numbers, as he caught 8 passes for 113 yards. This game was pretty close. The Panthers, with a little over a minute left in the game, kicked or were able to get a touchdown, and they decided to go for a 2-point conversion. Graham Gano had missed a field goal, an extra point earlier in this game, but even with that, I didn't really get the attempt. And it backfired as they didn't get the 2-point conversion and they lost the game. And I just don't get that. I think they should have went for the extra point. Even with Graham Gano, you have to do it. I mean, if you had 3 timeouts left in the game, I mean, it would have been risky, but at the very least, I could have seen some understanding to it. But I didn't really in this game, and it cost the Panthers. And they've now lost, last week. The previous week before that, they were blown out by the Steelers, and they lost a heartbreaker on the road. So hopefully, returning home was able to get them back. The Steelers versus the Jaguars, rematch of last year's AFC divisional round. This time it was in Jacksonville. The Steelers pretty much didn't do anything for nearly 3.5 quarters. Offensively, they couldn't get on track. The running game was pretty much non-existent in this game. And Antonio Brown was pretty non-existent up until the fourth quarter as he was able to get that touchdown. And he did pretty well. Juju Smith was able to do well once they got it going. For me, the reason the Jaguars, I'll talk about the way they lost this game, but the reason they kind of struggled on offense was beyond Leonard Fournette, they couldn't do anything. A lot of their drives, they had 3 and out. I mean, when you have a quarterback that's playing as one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, and it was just a pedestrian, predictable offense. And it's as good as their defense played for most of it, eventually you're going to wear out your defense, and that's what happened. The Steelers were able to catch up. They got in, Ben Roethlisberger played well in the fourth quarter, but I gotta say he played like crap for most of this game. He threw 3 interceptions. I think he's thrown in his last 3 games against the Jaguars almost like 10 interceptions. It's been really bad, but he did it when it counted. They were down 16-0, I think, going into the fourth quarter. They were able to get in less than 10 seconds left. He was able to run for a quarterback run for a touchdown, and he was able to win the game. And Jacksonville's season has just been a disaster, and it continued as they blew a game they really should have won, as the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to continue their winning streak and were able to come away with the victory in this game 20-16. Texans versus the Redskins. As I said in my Week 11 NFL picks video, this was between 2 6-3 teams that I don't think anybody expected. I don't think at least anybody expected both these teams to be 6-3. But this was a pretty close game. It was kind of back and forth. This was the first game this season where the Redskins, when they were trailing, they were able to get a lead in this game. Unfortunately, in the third quarter, bad luck struck them as Alex Smith suffered the same injury that Joe Theismann, legendary Redskins quarterback, suffered 33 years to the date. Joe Theismann was even in attendance at this game. There were so many ironies and coincidence of the injury Alex Smith was taking. He had to be carted off. It was found out that he broke not only his tibia but his fibula. Has to have surgery and is out for the rest of the year. And it's really a shame because Alex Smith was really not doing too bad, if you ask me. I thought he was doing very well, and the Redskins were kind of winning a weak NFC East. But unfortunately, he's out for the season. The Redskins, they got a long road ahead of them. Obviously, Colt McCoy did okay, and the Texans, I think after they kind of were back and forth in this game, but and even the Redskins, they had a chance for a 63-yard field goal to win the game, but that wasn't the case. And the Houston Texans were able to just hold on and win their 7th game in a row. And as far as I'm concerned, the Redskins, they're in trouble right now, and I don't know what's gonna. To be asked me, I think it's gonna be very tough for them without Alex Smith to get into the postseason. Titans versus the Colts. I expected the Titans coming off upsetting the New England Patriots, thinking their defense is going to do very well. That was not the case. Andrew Luck has proven with a good offensive line and with him healthy, you can do some incredible things, and he did. He threw for almost 300 yards. He threw 3 touchdowns. He looked like an MVP. And the Colts, really, they've been rejuvenated this year, and he's the big reason why. And I got to say, I think them Quentin Nelson, I thought that was a really good draft pick, and it helped their offensive line, and look what it's done. As far as the Titans were concerned, they were just dominated in this game. Marcus Mariota had to leave this game due to another injury. This is not the first time this has happened this season. Blaine Gabbert came in. He didn't do well either, and the Colts were able to blow the Titans out 38-10. The Colts are now sitting at 500 and are back in the playoff race, really thanks to Andrew Luck. Broncos versus the Chargers, a game, obviously a AFC West competition. Phillip Rivers did pretty well. Even though he threw 2 interceptions, he did throw for 400 yards. But once again, some bad clock management in this game, as Case Keenum, who didn't play that well, still had an opportunity to go down the field and get his team in range for a game-winning field goal, and they were able to do that as Brandon McManus was able to kick a game-winning field goal, and the Broncos were able to upset the Chargers. Raiders versus the Cardinals, between two teams that are pretty much competing for the top draft pick in next year's draft. And as far as I'm concerned, this was a game, we saw Derek Carr and John Gruden kind of have, or they did have arguments on the sideline. This was a game both offenses really didn't do that well. Josh Rosen threw 2 really bad interceptions, although he did, the touchdown drives that he had were pretty well. The reason the Cardinals offense didn't look all that terrible was because of David Johnson, as he ran for over 137 yards, and he's starting in the last couple weeks. He's starting to return to that form that he did prior to 2017. Remember 2016, where he almost had a 1,000 season. The Cardinals, they pretty much they were winning this game, thanks to a touchdown drive by Josh Rosen and David Johnson. They were able to get to Larry Fitzgerald in the end zone, and unfortunately, they just managed the clock terribly. I think the Raiders had no timeouts. They had a 1-point lead. All the Cardinals really had to do was just run clock out, and they took some dumb penalties. Jermaine Gresham, after somebody was on Larry Fitzgerald on top of him, pulled him off. He got an unnecessary roughness penalty, and then David Johnson was able to run back for a big touchdown, but it was called back thanks to a Ricky Seals-Jones holding call. The Cardinals had to punt the ball. The Raiders were able to go down the field and get in position for the game-winning field goal, and they were able to kick it. And just a bad managed game for the Arizona Cardinals. And if you ask me, I really don't think the Cardinals are going to win another game this season. So that's just my opinion. But the Raiders were able to come away with a 23-21 victory, even though this probably may have screwed up their draft position. Eagles versus the Saints, the defending Super Bowl champions, against probably the top Super Bowl contender this year. This was just a blowout. I mean, this was the worst loss that a defending Super Bowl champion team ever had in NFL history. We saw Carson Wentz on the sideline. He was frustrated, and Drew Brees pretty much put up some statistics to possibly win an MVP award. He threw over 360 yards, 4 touchdowns. Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara had decent games. This was just a game that that offense dominated, and they just dominated the Eagles. And right now, I think the Saints, if you ask me, they're the team to beat, not only in the NFC, but in the NFL right now. Vikings versus the Bears, a matchup for who will be in first place for the NFC North. Kirk Cousins didn't really play that well. He doesn't have a great record against teams above 500, as they showed after this game. The Bears, Trubisky didn't play that well. But it was really the defense that was able to pick it up. Khalil Mack had a big game. That whole defense played pretty well, but it was just a dominated game on defense, and they were able to win the game 25-20. And then the last game of Week 11 was the epic Monday Night Football game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Rams. A game that was supposed to be in Mexico City, but due to bad field conditions, was moved back to L.A., and what can you say? This was pretty much, if you've never watched football and this was your first football game that you watched, you're going to love the NFL if you like high-scoring offense, because this is what it was. It was just back and forth between two MVP caliber offenses, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff, it was just a really good game, back and forth game. And even if the main goal on defense was to stop teams from scoring, you didn't do that. But there were a couple defensive touchdowns in this game. Patrick Mahomes ended up throwing 3 interceptions, but he threw 6 touchdowns and 478 yards. Jared Goff threw 413 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He did have a fumble that was recovered for a touchdown. I think some other, I think if you count the fumbles that happened to the Chiefs, they had 5 turnovers on offense. But even that, it didn't cost them. It was just back and forth. There was scoring from all parts of the field. I mean, it was just so back and forth and such a great game. And I got to say, it would be absolutely phenomenal. As a football fan, this is just my personal opinion, but it would be great to see these two teams have a rematch in Super Bowl 53, just these two offenses. I mean, it was, I think, second, I think it currently sits at second for highest combined score in NFL history. It was truly amazing, and the Rams were able to come away with a victory. But I think coming out of it, both teams' offenses looked great, and but I think the defenses were definitely had a lot of question marks and a lot of work to do in the weeks coming forward. But these are two Super Bowl caliber winning offenses. Before I talk about the divisions, here are my players of the week. As I stated before, offensive player of the week will be Jared Goff. It could have went to Drew Brees. It could have went to Patrick Mahomes. But I'm going to give it to Jared Goff, throwing for over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's incredible. I mean, there were so many lead changes in that game, but I got to give him credit where credit's due, and he definitely came off a very good performance. And as far as my defensive player of the week, I'm going to stay with the Rams. I'm going to go with Aaron Donald, who forced 2 fumbles. He had a couple sacks. Obviously, those 2 forced fumbles count as sacks, three solo tackles, and 4 total tackles. And it could have went to some other players, but I'm going to give my credit to the Rams this week, as both those players looked like MVPs. As we've gone far enough into the season for me to start talking about it, the playoff pictures in both the AFC and the NFC as of Week 11. Currently leading the AFC West is the Kansas City Chiefs at 9-2. They're currently the first, even with the loss. They still have first place in the AFC as they head into a bye week. Second on that list, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who at 7-2-1 have won a lot of games in a row. Even though this game, even though they won, I don't think they looked very impressive. And honestly, this is something that happened to them last year, where you saw them playing from behind most of the game and then coming back at the end. I think if you want to be that's the reason they weren't in the Super Bowl last year. And if they're able to do that, if they're able to clean things up and play 4 good quarters of football, I think they are Super Bowl contenders. On third on this list, the New England Patriots, who had a bye week at 7-3, and then fourth is the Houston Texans, sitting at 7-3 as they've won 7 games in a row. The wild cards currently are the Los Angeles Chargers at 7-3, as their second place in the AFC West, obviously 2 games back of the Chiefs. And then 6th on this list, they currently own the tiebreaker right now, as a bunch of teams are currently 500 at 5-5. The Baltimore Ravens are the 6th seed. The Bengals, the Miami Dolphins, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Tennessee Titans are all tied for that, but they're currently, as far as tiebreakers are concerned, they're below the Ravens. In the NFC, currently the Rams are sitting at 10-1, even though they've played one more game over the second place New Orleans Saints, who beat them earlier. So if both teams ended with the same standings at the end of the season, the Saints would have the tiebreaker due to the head-to-head matchup, but they're currently sitting at second place. The Chicago Bears are sitting at 7-3, third and leading the NFC North, and the Redskins currently, even though they just lost Alex Smith, are sitting at 6-4 atop of the NFC East. The wild cards currently are the 6-4 Carolina Panthers, as they're second in the NFC South, and the Minnesota Vikings are second in the NFC North, as they currently have the second wild card place, sitting at a 5-4-1 record. The teams behind them still in the playoff hunt are the Seattle Seahawks at 5-5, the Dallas Cowboys at 5-5, but they're possibly looking to compete for the division, as the Alex Smith injury has really opened up the division. The Green Bay Packers are 4-5-1, and teams that are currently 4-6, I think the 3 teams between the Falcons, Lions, and Eagles. I think the Eagles, if you ask me, are the only team that I could see get back in the playoff hunt, really because of the division they're in. But those are the teams behind them, and that's where the NFC playoff race. And that's it for my video. As always, follow me on Twitter at BaileyLager96. If you hadn't seen it already, I just did a film review as Creed 2 came out today, so I did a non-spoiler review for that, and it came out earlier, so check that out on my channel. I will do a spoiler-filled review that will come out Friday. If you like my NFL videos, check out tomorrow, as I'm going to be doing my week 12 NFL picks video, as it will be Thanksgiving tomorrow, and this is Thanksgiving week, so I hope everybody, as I stated in my Creed review video, has a happy and safe Thanksgiving. So that click like if you like the video, subscribe, and leave your comments below on what you thought of Week 11 of the 2018 NFL season. So thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you tomorrow and on Thanksgiving for my Week 12 NFL picks video.